to the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I'm your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and excited to be joined today by Assemblyman James Gallagher, also the Assembly Republican leader in our house. Welcome to the podcast, James. Great having you.
Yeah, man. Great to be here with you, Josh. I'm a little dressed down
You're good, man.
This morning, but we'll get down to business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Soon enough, right?
No, this is great, man. Yeah. We love having you on. And we were saying right before the show, like we've technically had you on with clips and stuff, but it's great having you in person.
Yeah, man. I'm honored to be on. I've been wanting to come on, so it's good to finally get in here with you.
No, it's great. So, hey, why don't we start out? We'll just talk for a minute about kind of your district and stuff. So, like, tell us a little bit about the district you represent and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm just to the north of you. I represent the beautiful Sacramento Valley, northern Sacramento Valley, and it's amazing, man. I love it. Obviously, I was born and raised there.
Yeah.
I'm a sixth generation Californian. My family's been in farming this whole time. So a lot of agriculture, a lot of farmland. Like if you drove through the 3rd Assembly District, you would see prunes and peaches and
awesome.
Tomatoes, rice, walnuts. So a lot of farmland. That's just that I think is a beautiful scenic part of California. We have the smallest mountain range in the world.
Nice.
The Sutter Buttes in my district. Chico is the biggest city. So we have Chico State University.
Chico State, yeah.
Wildcats.
I was trying to remember the mascot. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and actually my daughter's going to be attending Chico State this fall. Yeah, man,
I was talking to your wife about it though. She's not living at home though, right? Like that.
No, yeah, I think she was wanting to get out of the house.
I think that's always my big question, right? It's like, are they living with you, or it's so funny.
And she probably could do the commute, but yeah, she's gonna stay in the dorms there.
That's cool. That's cool.
But yeah, also like a lot of just small rural towns, that I think are really iconic. Red Bluff and Orland, Willows, a lot of historic. Buildings, some of the older courthouses in the state are in my district. So, man, it's a beautiful district made of some really awesome people that I've been fortunate enough to represent for going on 10 years now.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And when obviously agriculture is a big part of that district too, right? And so I'm sure they've had their struggles over the years with some of the policies coming out of here and everything. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a ongoing, tough issue is trying to really educate other members about the needs of agriculture and how that industry is different, and that you can't really treat it as one size fits all.
Yeah.
But that's a common theme for us across the board. Also, we have actually some pretty good manufacturing bases. In Chico out by the airport, Oroville has a pretty good manufacturing hub, and Yuba City as well. So we've got, some good manufacturing jobs, in the district. They're important as well. Healthcare facilities, our hospitals are pretty key, and that's been a big issue of late.
Especially, for sure. No, it's awesome. Tell us a little bit about your background. Like, how did you end up in the legislature? I don't even know if I know the full story, honestly, but what kind of made you get involved and run for public office and kind of end up here where you're at now?
I've always been interested in politics. I mean, ever since I was a little kid. And I think maybe the first thing that got me interested is my grandfather actually was on the Board of Supervisors. And so I remember I was like just a little boy, going into one of his campaign offices when he was running.
Nice.
And just kind of realizing that, hey, this is really important that we stand up and be a voice, for our community and for our values. And so, all through school, I was always kind of that kid, I guess, that was really interested in politics.
Yeah.
I like debate. I got the Constitution Award in 8th grade.
That's awesome.
That was a really big highlight for me.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And so then, going on into college, I studied political science, got more involved in the nuts and bolts of politics, helped out on some campaigns. Yeah. And then when I graduated college, I did the Assembly Fellowship. So I did that for a year. I worked with Assemblyman Doug LaMalfa at the time. Really enjoyed that. And then I went to law school, got my legal education and actually started practicing in Yuba City.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it came a supervisor seat, came open. I decided to run for it. Had some people kind of encouraging me to do that. Yeah. Again, I'd been involved in different things, and people said, "Hey, you should think about doing." But I was young. I was, for that race, I was, I think, 27.
That's young, man.
Yeah. So I ran for the Board of Supervisors, and was lucky. Actually, it ended up being nobody ran. I had a walk-on essentially in my first race. We went out there and put a lot of work in, and I had built up a lot of support. But got elected to the Board of Supervisors, and did that for 6 years.
Yeah,
but I'd always kind of thought, like, man, I think I might want to maybe run and get involved with state, legislative politics. Obviously, being on the board, there was a lot of state laws and policies that made it tough on us. So I was like, hey, let's go take that on. Yeah. And ran for Assembly in 2014. Awesome. And got elected. So
that's cool.
That was kind of my
So you were
path.
like early 30s when you got elected to the Assembly. Then.
Yeah.
So you were, that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah. So
this is
34, I think, when I got elected.
That's how old I was.
Yeah.
Too. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's pretty weird.
Yeah.
It is weird, though, getting elected young, right? Like, I think I got elected to the school board when I was like 30. And it definitely felt weird, right? Because everyone, like, nobody else.
You were probably the youngest one there.
Oh, by far, right? Like, so it's just kind of, that's pretty neat, though. That's a cool story. So what are some things you've learned, like, as minority leader or Republican leader, I guess, but I kind of like the old school phrasing, like the minority leader. What is that kind of experience taught you, I guess, other than just being an assembly member, right? Like, obviously you have a lot of different stuff to deal with than I do.
Some people joke that it's the worst job in the legislature.
It looks like the worst job, I'll be honest with you.
And there are some definitely tough aspects, right, of being, you're the leader of the minority party.
Yeah.
And I'd seen other people, in the role, so I'd, watched, Brian Daly, who I'm really close to, and, he was in that role, and, watched Marie Waldron and Chad Mays. So I'd kind of seen, a little bit of what that was like, but I think, once there's no comparison to like actually being in it. And I think the thing that is really important is that we truly be the voice of the opposition. I mean, that's important in any government, is that you have that opposing view.
100%.
Shouldn't just be only one view, right? There should be a lot of different views being expressed. Yeah. And so I think one of the things that I've tried to do, since I've took on the leadership role, is like really, take that on and take that really seriously and be really aggressive. Like, from the very beginning, we said, hey, let's go on the offensive, and let's talk about what we would do. Right. And try and make the Democrats be the ones that say no. Yeah. And then you draw that contrast, and you're able to have that public debate, but then take it out, to the public, right? Yeah. And like let the public know that, hey, these are the differences, right? So, one thing I really tried to focus on, I think we've been able to do pretty well, is like really upping our communications and trying to get that out. Here's an example of it. We're sitting here on your podcast. Yeah. And just getting out to, some different folks, what's going on, what is going on, what's truly going on in the legislature, and how does that affect you in a real life way? Yeah. One great example, I think, that came up during your race, is the gas tax, right? Like it was a huge issue that people were paying way too much for gas. They still are. For sure. And we said, hey, let's suspend the gas tax to get people relief right now. Yeah. We went out there really hard and pushed that issue. And we're able to, I think, make that something that showed that contrast, that showed here's what Republicans would do as opposed to what, the majority party is doing, that would make a big difference in your everyday commute, and in your everyday life. So I think, that's one big thing I've learned. I think the other one is just like really like when you're in the minority, you really got to work to keep everybody together and focused and disciplined on those issues. And
that's easier said than done too. So
I mean, I think the speaker has a much harder job in that respect, right?
Oh, for sure, for sure. He's got a lot more people to keep, together. Right?
Keeping, you got 62 members that that he's working with, but our 18 are great,
Yeah.
And I think each and every one of us, brings something special to the table.
Yeah.
And I think an important thing about, being a leader of any organization is, hey, how do you try to utilize everybody's talents?
Right.
And try and get everybody's input and bring that into what you're trying to do. It's a team sport, right? Yeah. Politics is a team sport, and you can't be successful at it without really, bringing all those pieces together.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and to your point, I mean, like, I think the balance aspect of this, like the current legislature, obviously very imbalanced. I think that's why you get the policy that you get. And so it is really important to have like those other voices in there. But even like within the parties, I mean, I think there's this misconception that like the Democrats vote this way and the Republicans vote this way. But like you look at the Democratic caucus and there is a vast like, I guess like spectrum of beliefs and opinions, right? And then even, amongst the Republican caucus a little bit too. But it's just like we need that. We need that diversity of thought, right? Like we need all these different ideas and these different perspectives. I mean, you coming from a more agricultural district, educating us on those issues, and like when some legislator tries to legislate on that from an urban district, it's like no, that doesn't work for us,
right?
And being able to share that perspective. So I just think it's really important.
No, absolutely, man. And like, just within our own caucus, like you bring a lot of great perspective of what's going on in a more suburban district, right? But also your educational background and knowing what that's like being a school board member, and,
for sure,
and how those policies get implemented and what works and what doesn't. Tom Lackey and Juan Alanis having their law enforcement background, I think is very beneficial to us. And we have people, Lori Davies, haven't been a wedding planner, an event planner, and her life perspective of someone
Diane's got all her business acumen and everything.
Right.
So everyone's bringing some to the table. It's awesome.
It really is. And I think that's, something that is important to like really bring that into everything. And we don't always agree, as you know, and from caucus, we don't always agree on everything, right? But what we do, I think, is we really try to put the focus on, hey, how can we show Californians that, we've got better plans, that we have things that I think would be better for, the overall community, that would certainly be, create safer communities, from a public safety standpoint, but also just from a quality of life, standpoint.
I mean, people are, I think, just as things continue to get more expensive, it's just being harder and harder to live here in California. And I think those are some of the things we're trying to point out. But to your point, like, it's not just about saying no to things, right? It's about offering solutions, right? And I think that's what we want to do. So.
And like, I mean, you and Joe have been able to do that on housing policy.
Yeah, for sure.
I think showing like, hey, here's a Republican way on housing that would actually lead to more housing, and more variety of housing that's offered and available.
I was reading a tweet the other day on that. Actually, I can't remember. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head who it was, but it was essentially pointing out that like Oregon, Washington, California, they're all kind of, I guess, one side politically, and they all talk about how we need housing, and they have like the least housing production of any of the states in like the United States.
I saw that.
Like, I don't know if you saw that, but it's just incredible.
I did. It's a great point.
It's like you guys talk about housing all the time, and yet we don't build any. Like we don't do anything. We don't have the environment where people can actually build housing.
Right. So, for all the talk and all the money spent.
Yeah, it's wild.
You guys haven't actually gotten results. And I think that's something we really point out too, is like, hey, what has this Democratic supermajority, and this governor, what have they actually accomplished, right? Like the things that they talk about, homelessness, housing, healthcare, have those things actually gotten better, or have they gotten worse? And I think the answer is unequivocally, they've gotten worse.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And Governor Newsom promised 3.5 million new homes when he ran for office, like 5 years ago?
I remember that he was going to be the housing governor.
The housing governor. And, I think we've barely scratched, I think we've had less than 1 million. I can't remember, but it's a very small number in comparison.
Right. The one I remember is we were supposed to be doing 300,000 units a year. Like if we really wanted to get on track. Right. And I think like there was only been 1 year where we got to like 100,000, or it's been pretty pretty abysmal.
Not even close, right? So, no, we have a lot of work to do. So let's dive in, and we're going to talk more about these issues too, definitely on the public safety side. So we're going to get there. But before we dive into our stories and our question of the week, how was your Father's Day? Did you get any time with the kids or
Yeah, man, it was great. This weekend, it was a busy weekend. So I have 5 kids.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I should mention. My wife Jana, and I have 5 children. And that can be as you know, man, like it can be a tough balance. When you're doing this job, it's really demanding. So finding that good balance of spending good quality time with your family. And so this weekend was Father's Day, but it was also like they're getting fair started. So 2 of my daughters are, they have animals that they're raising for fair. And so we had that going on, like trying to get the animals ready to get them over to the fair, but and I spent some time with my dad, went out there, my dad's a big part of my life,
That's awesome.
And so we're able to go out and spend some time with him as well. And, have, I love that, man. I crave more of that, obviously, with my family. And just get a little bit of just time away from all the politics and everything else that's going on. And just be able to, converse and have, some good time with them.
That's cool. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great, man. I'm glad you got that. I think we did a little bit of stuff. I actually ended up doing 9 holes on Sunday morning before church.
Okay.
I snuck out there and
that was your Father's Day gift?
Well, because my wife was like, tomorrow's going to be kind of lame because a lot of my family had to be at church all day because there's a big camp this week.
Okay.
And so they're helping set it up. And so we had a lot, to your point, like there's a lot going on, right? So it's kind of falls on a weekend where there's a lot going on. So she's like, I think it's gonna be kind of lame. And I'm like, no, it'll be fine. I'm like, hey, could I go maybe squeeze 9 holes in before church? And
golf is one of those tough things when you have a family. I love to play golf, but it's always like, okay, if I play 18, that's going to be like a 4-hour.
Impossible. The only time I play 18 is if I'm on a trip or something. I can't do it. It's like 9 holes is all I can usually squeeze.
I'm the same, and I've been taking my son out, when I can. Cool. Yeah. And when we go, it's like, hey, if we do 9, that's good.
Yeah.
And then
2 hours, you call it or whatever.
When are you coming home now? Okay. All right.
No, I totally hear you. So got to do that, and then ended up having lunch with my dad, and then did a little family movie night, some shopping and stuff. But so pretty low key, but really just good family time. That was it, right?
Right.
So, good stuff, man. Well, hey, let's jump in. So we've been doing this thing where we do like a question of the week. So we poll the listeners and go on X and answer our X poll. So question of the week this week is relating to junk fees. I don't know if you saw this bill, but well, let me pull up the article instead of trying to pull from memory. But last year, the legislature passed this bill on hidden fees for businesses, right? If you remember that one where you can't, you have to basically lay out all of the fees in the cost of your product or whatever, versus tacking on additional fees and things like that. And I think it was trying to get after resort fees, for example, at a resort, but it also applies to a bunch of different industries. So the author of the bill, Bill Dodd, came out with a new bill, I think just last week or 2 weeks ago. He got an amended bill to basically carve out the restaurant industry from this bill and basically say they don't have to comply with the provisions of this junk fee bill as long as they include the fees somewhere on their menu, I think is how the bill reads. Okay. And so I was kind of surprised by it, but it's coming down. I guess we'll see it at some point. I don't know when. I haven't seen it yet. There's no votes on it or anything, but anyway, question this week is going to be, should restaurants be exempted from California's new law prohibiting hidden fees? So you can go to our X poll at Point of Order Pod on X if you want to vote on that. But I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on it. I can tell you some from my perspective, but I wanted to see if you had any thoughts.
Well, I mean, look, I think this issue, it's an important one. I get the frustration that a lot of people, a lot of families feel when, you don't feel like you've gotten the full cost of an activity or going somewhere or staying somewhere. And obviously in these high cost times, I think it's even more frustrating with inflation and it's harder and harder to,
for sure,
make all those things work. So I get the frustration with it. I think there is a balance to this because look, there are obviously some legitimate fees as well that, different businesses need to charge. And, I guess the point of this is really transparency. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I look at these as like, I think there's got to be a balance there of figuring out, hey, how do we ensure that, people are getting the full view of what something costs and avoiding, surprise fees, if you will.
Exactly.
But also like really trying to look at, hey, what are the needs of those industries? I think one thing that I'm always frustrated about in Sacramento is that I don't think that we always take the time of really asking the industry themselves, like, hey, how could you make this work? And how does this really work for you? Is this can we implement this? I hate that in agriculture, right? Like, they pass things all the time that deal with agriculture. Most of the members don't know anything about it. And you're like, did you even take the time to find out how that might work? And so in this case, with the restaurant industry and with the hotels, right, and lodging, really trying to find out, hey, what are these issues and better understanding them before we just go and pass laws. And then the last thought I would have is I don't like carve-out. I'm not a big fan
I hear that.
of carve-outs. And I think that's why, hey, let's put some thought into the policy ahead of time.
Before you pass it, right?
And then you don't have to go back and go, okay, well, maybe this doesn't work in this instance. And we obviously saw that with the whole fast food controversy, right? Where they exempted out Panera, and everything that went with that. People get really frustrated with that. It's like, why are if you're going to pass a law, first of all, put a lot of thought into it and understand what it means, but also try to be consistent, right, and treat things as try to make sure that's consistent across the board
for sure.
And but also having that ability to go, look, okay, maybe this industry is different than others, and because they are. Not every industry is the same.
No, I definitely agree. I think it's similar. It's funny. So I got a text a couple days ago from a restaurant owner in my district who actually hates this bill, even though it would technically carve him out because he's a restaurant owner, right? But he, and so again, just to like share his perspective, and he is like he's very upset about the minimum wage increase. He feels like California is a really hard place to do business, right? And he is constantly being like hammered, right, from the state with all these new requirements and regulations and wage increases. And he said it's all terrible, but he also like really prioritizes customer service, and he gets really frustrated, when like, let's say, and a lot of this, by the way, is coming from, you pay for a meal, the price of the meal is on the menu, like this is $20, right? And then you get your bill, and it's got like a healthcare charge, and it's got a service charge, and then a convenience. I'm just making some of this up, but essentially, some restaurants have gone to this approach where to kind of lessen the sticker shock of these wage increases, right? Which is the state of California's fault,
right?
They have kind of come to this approach where they just tack on a bunch of fees at the end of the meal. And he does view that as a problematic kind of bait and switch for the customer, which I totally see his point on that too. And he's like, it's terrible, but you gotta work it into your price, right? So we'll see what happens with this. I don't know. I don't even know like how far this bill is going to go this year. It seems like it's getting going really late in the process, but we'll see how it fares in the assembly. So, but if you want to vote on that. Should restaurants be exempted from California's new law prohibiting hidden fees? You can go to @PointOfOrderPod on X to vote on that.
Yeah, tell us how you feel.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be good to hear from the folks out there.
That's why I wanted to throw
what they
this
think
one
should
out
be the
there,
case.
Because I'm always like, it's.
Well, the other thing it made me think
really
about, Josh, is like during COVID, how many restaurants just got hammered, and we had this, and people did feel like there's one rule for one group and there's one rule for another. Like, all these restaurants were struggling. A lot of them put a lot of time and effort to, hey, I could safely operate.
Yep.
And I could do it this way only to be rejected by, basically the governor's one size fits all regulations.
Yep. 100%.
And then they're seeing like, oh, but, Hollywood can have, outdoor eating establishments,
buffets, and it was ridiculous.
It's crazy. And you saw that it went viral,
that video. I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
That was going, how is it that I can't have my business open? And here they are, basically doing the same thing for Hollywood. And everybody saw, hey, you go into Lowe's and Home Depot, no problem.
Yep.
You can do all those things, but we can't let, a restaurant be. And that did lasting damage. We saw a lot of restaurants go out of business, because of that. So that's really frustrating.
That video was amazing too, because it was like the Hollywood setup was like right by her restaurant, right? And so she literally filmed her restaurant, like going like, "Hey, I can't be open right here," and then she turned around and it's like all of these tables and chairs that are legal in her backyard, essentially. Yeah. It's totally cool.
Yeah,
it was just wrong. Made zero sense.
It was just really wrong.
Yeah, and I think businesses are feeling hammered, and they're, we're going to actually talk about a story in a second here. In fact, let's start with it. Let's jump into our stories of the week. In-N-Out is raising the prices based off this minimum wage increase, right?
Yeah.
And now they're not doing any hidden fees or anything. They're incorporating it into their prices, but they fought so hard to not raise prices. They really did not want to raise them more than a tiny bit, and they're finally kind of having to do it. And I know that hurts for the business because they don't want to charge their consumers more, but at a certain point, they don't have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, not surprising, right? Like, it's not surprising. And we warned this would happen, right? I mean, it said, look, you do this, and all it's going to mean is that it's going to be, the prices are going to go up at fast food.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing automation.
Yep.
So we're losing those jobs because people are saying, well, if that's going to be the case, then we'll just move more to kiosks. So I think you're seeing, this is exactly what we said would happen.
Yep.
Like when you do these things, and that would have been a good thing to ask, right? Like when they were doing all this, why didn't they really, ask fast food establishments, like, okay, you're going to do all this. What is that really going to mean for the consumer?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we knew that it was going to raise prices. And so now you're already starting to see this. And I think you're going to see it, across the board with a lot of different, fast food establishments. Unfortunately, the prices are going to go up, and we're actually going to lose jobs over it.
Yeah, I think we've already lost like tens of thousands of jobs. I will tell you, in my community, the other effect that it's had is we're losing restaurants. I mean, I've been getting texts from some of my franchise owners who are saying, "Hey, we're closing these locations."
Right? Rubio's, right? I think
Rubio's just shut down everything, right? I'm losing one of my neighborhood McDonald's. I mean, they're literally going through and having to shut down. I mean, they literally just redid this entire McDonald's. They redid the play structure, remodeled the entire thing like a year ago, and they're having to shut it down now.
Yeah,
and it's just like it is, and it's like I think the frustrating thing about it is it's kind of an "I told you so," right? But it's we knew what was going to happen. Like, there's this misconception in the state capitol that, we can raise prices and businesses will just be able to pay it. But not acknowledging the reality that, no, it's customers that are going to pay it.
Right.
It's not, you know what I mean? Like, that's not how the economy works. And it's frustrating. So.
And it's even worse in agriculture. That's another thing I always point out is like every regulation, every new tax that gets put on, every new cost that gets put on farmers, we actually don't get to raise our prices. Our prices are really controlled by the market. In many ways, like a global market is what's setting price. So we can see that price go up and down. We really don't have a whole lot of control over it. Yeah. And so and right now there's a lot of commodities that are very low prices, but all the costs are still there.
Yep.
And it's a struggle, I mean, and, but in the grocery store, that's the other thing in the grocery store, all your prices are up, right? But that doesn't mean the farmer is getting paid more.
Yeah.
So those are, it's another instance of where, hey, you got to look at an industry and see how this is really going to play out before you pass really, impactful legislation.
For sure. I don't know if you saw Joe Patterson. He's been on this pod a bunch of times, but he tweeted the other day. He was at Chevron, and they've got these new signs at the Chevron gas stations that just say, "You pay more less for gas in other states, and you can scan a QR code and see like how much gas costs in other states.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's pretty awesome, man.
Right. Educate like, the consumer. Right.
I was blown away by that. So, but it's true. Like, it's like we always hear like, oh, they're price gouging you. It's like, well, why are they only price gouging us in California? They're not price gouging you in Texas.
Right.
I went out to Texas. I paid $2 less a gallon, so who's the real culprit here? Like, what's the real problem here?
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot, man. I mean, and obviously we've actually seen a lot on this front, right? Yeah. And we've had these hearings, and it's become very clear that the real price driver of gas is one, that we don't really produce a whole lot. Right. We don't have as many refineries. We're kind of an energy island in California from that standpoint. And also we're now importing much more because we're shutting down domestic oil production. So we're importing from these petro dictatorships. Yeah. And there's cost to that. But then the biggest driver is really regulations and taxes, which accounts for, I think it's $1.28 a gallon. That's what you're paying that no one else is paying, everywhere else in the nation. And that's why our gas prices are so high, Gavin doesn't want to admit it, but that's the reality. For sure. And, so it's really government that is gouging the people here in California.
No, it's a great point. Real quick, I want to just touch on the state budget. So last week, you had some things to say, obviously, but we passed the quote unquote state budget, at least to meet the constitutional requirement. I'm sure we're going to be having a lot more budget trailer bills, coming behind it. But, you had some pretty, I'll give you a minute to just chat briefly about the budget, because I know, we had some major tax increases in there on businesses that are going to increase costs, I think, even more on consumers. We had a lot of concerning public safety cuts, prison funding cuts, education cuts. I mean, there's a lot in that budget. I opposed it for those reasons, but yeah, I just wanted to give you a minute.
Yeah, I mean, as is always said, a budget is really a statement of values, a statement of priorities. And we're in these tough budgetary times, and the Democratic budget, that's what it is. This is a Democratic budget and a Gavin Newsom budget, I think make some really bad priorities. Yep. They cut funding for foster kids. They cut funding for special needs kids in preschool
programs. Yep.
Right. And then at the same time, they're going and they're funding, this new day spa at San Quentin prison, to make prisoners, I guess, feel better, in San Quentin, but cutting our kids, right? They suspended Prop 98. Yep. I think unnecessarily in this case. And so our kids are going to suffer.
Which districts are really unhappy about, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so... And then, but they're still putting money into making sure that your kids get to school on an electric bus. Yeah. Right. So millions of dollars going towards electric buses for schools. Yep. Meanwhile, our kids can't even read at grade level. So these are some pretty, I think out of whack priorities in the budget. Cuts to public safety. So, at a time when the Democrats are trying to say that they're supporting public safety, they're actually cutting public safety, right? They're not making that a priority. And then they're doing all this funny business that we'll talk about, on Prop 47. But all these things are a statement of priorities. They're still continuing to fund high-speed rail. Yep. Right. This boondoggle that's it's not affordable, it's not feasible, but we're still putting money into it.
So crazy thing. I'm glad you brought that up. So funding high-speed rail, and then diverting like $400 million from the gas tax to go pay for non-road priorities. Right. I mean, just insane. And my constituents, this drives them insane. And I would say I hear about this more at my community meetings than anything else, is why are our roads so bad? This is part of the reason why. Because we take the money that you pay in your gas taxes, the super high gas taxes we were just talking about. Right. And we spend them on other things. We don't spend them on roads. We don't put them where you think that they're going or where they should be going. And so that's why you're not driving on good roads, and yet you're paying the highest gas tax in the country. It's insane.
Yeah. They told everybody, hey, we need this gas tax so we can really, do all these road projects and make sure your roads are safe and are brought up to standard, right? Well, so now after years of having this gas tax in place, do you drive over the best roads in the country? Absolutely not. Yep. Everybody knows it. It's very obvious. And then to add insult to injury, that money that's supposed to be going to roads is getting diverted for, bike lanes and bus stops. And these kinds of, it's like has nothing to do with actually improving our roads. Look, I think people are waking up to this. And I think another reason why it's great to have a strong opposition party like we do is we're pointing this out to the public, and you can see that the frustration is rising, and I think that, people have been voting Democrat in California for a long time. I think that's going to change because people are starting to say, look, this is not working out for me.
For sure. And, I mean, just on the road thing, I mean, my gosh, Sacramento County has not seen the benefits of this. I'll tell you that. and that is, I drive down Greenback and Madison and Watt around my district every week. And you should see my windshield right now. Giant crack through it, man. I mean, like, it is just terrible,
And you're not alone in that.
And that's just more costs, right? More costs on people's tires, more costs on people's cars, more maintenance. I mean, it has these ripple effects. It's not just you're paying the most gas taxes, and you're probably paying some of the highest maintenance, for your car too, because of the road,
registration.
Right? So it's just ridiculous. So, all right, switching gears. So 2 more stories, and then we'll get to the public safety thing because I want to get you out of here. But couple interesting stories this week. So Cal Matters did a piece. It's called "Find Out Which Lobbying Groups Get Their Way Most Often in the California Legislature." I don't know if you saw this piece.
I hadn't seen that. No.
It's pretty interesting. So they have this digital democracy project, which I actually really like what they're doing with that. So
right,
if you go to Cal Matters website and just look up their digital democracy page, they've got a ton of cool data on there about all things legislative and politics and all that good stuff. But essentially, they did an analysis of the organizations that have been most successful in passing their agendas during the current legislative session. It looked at every organization that took a position on something and broke it all down. Let's see. Unions feature prominently, accounting for 5 of the 25 most successful organizations. Labor scored a bunch of big wins. Let's see. County of Los Angeles did very well. That's not totally shocking, actually, because I think like a third of the legislature is represented in LA County. Civil rights groups, ACLU. Let's see. And then I'm trying to. I thought they had a better breakdown of this, but essentially, like the groups that didn't do well, taxpayer groups like the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. Business groups regularly did pretty poorly, and then public safety groups. Those were the 3 groups that really got, hit the hardest in terms of their agendas getting either passed or fail or whatever. So just thought it was an interesting piece. We'll put it in the show notes for people that want to read more into it. It's actually a pretty long article, but that's kind of the gist of it. So
yeah, I mean, and look, a lot of money getting spent. Consumer attorneys, always seem to get what they want, in Sacramento, and, all that creates more cost, creates more liability, and you end up paying the cost of that, right? And they have very strong lobby. The other thing, a lot of people, this is just on the lobbying effort, right?
Yeah.
But look how much money goes into politics, right? And you look at the different groups that are spending millions and millions of dollars,
for sure,
to elect their candidates to the legislature, and then if you follow it, they tend to get what they want.
Yeah,
they tend to like the policy that comes out of here. I mean, I think, what was it last year? There were so many labor priorities that passed out of this legislature, and maybe the biggest one that everybody kind of really honed in on was the giving people unemployment benefits if you go on strike.
Yep. Exactly.
Which I think a lot of people looked at as like, man, that is crazy. You can't, you can't do that. It's not sustainable. And luckily the governor vetoed it.
Especially the way our unemployment system's looking right now.
Right. Yeah. We have this huge debt coming out of basically mismanagement at EDD. And then they passed this bill. Luckily that was actually vetoed. But you're seeing, certainly like this is good to have this transparency on like how much money is being spent. And what's happening, in your legislature.
For sure. This was an interesting nugget, and then I'll move on. the district attorney's office, headed by George Gascon, topped one of the lists. Got 31 of their 35 bills through the legislature. I mean, that's pretty wild. I mean, this is a guy, facing essentially a
that shows you how
huge
out of
backlash
whack.
in Los Angeles. He got an 89% success rate here in the state capitol. That's a huge problem. The San Francisco just kicked out Chesa Boudin last year. We've got similar fight going on down in LA, but the priorities are off, So,
and we are, but the good news is I think we're starting to see a backlash, right? Like
for sure,
these policies, people are saying, "Hey, man, this is making my community less safe."
Yep. Yeah.
And yeah, I think very likely that you could see Gascon get ousted in this next election. Nathan Hochman's running against him down there, and I think making a great case to the voters that we want real public safety, we want real accountability. But you can see, look, they've been playing big, in the legislature, and they've been playing big in politics, and that's why you get, some of these policies that come out of Sacramento. So people need to really just pay attention to it and say, look, is this the kind of government I want to have? Yeah. And that's where we're talking about, hey, we've got a better path forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
speaking of backlash, PPIC, this is the last story we'll do, but PPIC did their survey of Californians in June. 42% Californians say the state budget situation is a big problem. Top issues on the minds of Californians: cost of living, economy, inflation. That's number one.
Yeah, number one. Consistently.
By a ton. Housing costs and availability, which really is very similar to number one, just like cost of living, right?
Right.
And homelessness, number three. So number four is crime and drugs, public safety. I mean, really, that's what I'm hearing. I mean, those are the four things I hear about the most. Housing kind of depends on the situation. Sometimes that gets lumped in with cost of living because people are looking at the cost of housing. At last podcast, we talked about the median price for a home in California, just for the first time ever, is over $900,000 in California. I mean, who can afford it? That's the middle
wild.
house in the state costs $900,000. That blew my mind, honestly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, these are the things that obviously matter to Californians, and people are really worried. I don't know, I have it in here somewhere, but Newsom, lowest approval ever.
He continues to go down. Yeah.
So there's obviously a backlash going on. There's Californians are not happy, and I hope that the majority party is able to see that and really shift gears, especially on this next topic we're about to talk about. So
yeah, I mean, that was definitely one I looked at very closely, and some interesting things in there. Biden's at 55%. Now they kind of lauded that, like, oh look, Biden's still popular here. But if you look at statewide Democrats. They're usually up in the 60s, in these PPIC polls. Biden's at 55%.
Actually.
That's lower than I think would be expected, which I think shows that a lot of people are dissatisfied with the job that President Biden is doing. I looked, in the Inland Empire.
Yeah,
we're seeing a lot of dissatisfaction, with the majority party and with the policies of the majority party. That was one that stood out to me. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting is, so they show that the initiatives like taxpayer protection, I think was under.
Right. Yeah.
But if you look at the numbers there was a pretty strong majority of people who said, or a strong plurality, I believe, of people who said, I would actually be willing to pay less taxes if it made less, even if it meant less services.
Less services, yeah.
And then there was a huge support for Prop 13.
Yep.
And so like I think that shows that actually the voters very much are like they're tired of the taxes.
Yep.
It's the cost of living is too high, and those are some really big takeaways to pay attention to.
Oh, for sure. And then this one, right? On is it a good time or a bad time to pass a bond, right? And this is we're discussing multiple bonds right now, right?
Right.
64% say it's a bad time to issue state bonds for state programs and infrastructure projects. I mean, we just passed Prop 1 by this much, right?
Right.
But barely past that. But, it's 64% say that's a bad time. That's really doesn't bode well for a lot of these, bonds or tax increases, right? That's the Citizens Initiative on new state and local tax limits. let's see, or I think that I'm getting that one mixed up here, but yeah. So, but just it's really incredible. And then when you look at, I think you said Prop 13 already. So
right,
huge
strong
support
for Prop 13.
So it's just really hard to. I don't think it's going to be a good year for some of these efforts. I mean, I think Prop 1 was kind of just an early sign of kind of what we're going to see in November. I think the fact that it struggled so mightily with so many resources and no opposition campaign, and yet it barely passed. I think voters are really nervous right now to commit to anything long term when it comes to spending or bonds or debt.
Anything that's going to raise their costs, raise their taxes, I think voters are going to reject.
Yep.
You know, and at the end of the day, I think the taxpayer protection, once they hear about what that does and helps protect them from increased taxes, I think that's also going to be something that voters are going to support.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump into our clip of the week, and this kind of sets up our discussion on, and then we'll get you out of here on Prop 47 and just updating people. So we did talk about it last week. We talked about this scheme going on at the state capitol where you have this initiative. By the way, I think since the last podcast it qualified. Initiative Reform Proposition 47, over 600,000 valid signatures on that that qualified for the ballot. So it will be on the ballot this year. The proponents have not shown any willingness to negotiate it off. And so at this point it's on there. So then, kind of in a last ditch effort to undermine this thing, the majority party has really hatched this scheme to amend a bunch of existing public safety bills on organized retail theft to make them inoperable if the initiative passes and these bills pass. Why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that, I think, so that the Attorney General can write an unfavorable title and summary that says, tells the voters, if you vote on this thing in November, you're going to be repealing all this awesome stuff we just did. And why would you want to do that? You're going to be repealing bills on organized retail theft and cracking down on it and everything, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the motivation. And it's, look, we've seen them do this kind of stuff before. I mean, starting with Prop 47, when they called it the Safe Neighborhoods Act.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, that's not true. That's not what it did. It actually made our neighborhoods less safe. And, they write the ballot title and summary in a way that favors their narrative, so it's definitely not beyond the pale to think that's their motive here is to tell people, and we need this Prop 47 reform. Yeah. We need it to tackle fentanyl, which has become a huge crisis in California. We need it to, provide real accountability to this petty theft that is happening every day in our retail establishments, in stores, grocery stores. But Democrats,
I'll tell you, organized retail theft is not what is stealing from my small businesses in my community, right?
Right.
You might see that with the Walmarts or the Nordstroms or whatever in the Bay Area, but the vast majority of retail theft going on is not organized retail
It's just
theft.
Personal. It's people realizing I can steal and get away with it.
Yep.
And so that's why we need that. But you're seeing the Democrats are panicking. The governor especially, right, is panicking and saying, man, if this is on the ballot, this will, hurt us politically. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because people are not with us on this issue. They're actually opposed to what we want.
Right.
And I think they're definitely afraid, hey, that might also lead to different people getting elected in November, So like a lot of this is very pure politics is what it is. It's not about policy, because the right policy here is to actually reform Prop 47 and to do this bipartisan, retail theft
package. We can have both. Let's play this clip. I'll get your take on it. This was a press conference last week. Ashley Zavala from KCRA was grilling Senate Pro Tem.
Do you worry about the message you might be sending to voters that we spent all this time on this package, but if we basically don't get our way and voters choose 47, then we're good. We're good on the efforts to have reporting requirements for retailers, to deal with the loopholes in the law on smash and grabs. I mean, you're just willing to, because those aren't in the ballot initiative.
I deeply worry about the opposite. First and foremost, I worry if we don't put an urgency clause into these bills, we're not doing what Californians want.
I mean, the repeal clause.
Californians want to be able to see urgency in these bills, and that's why we have an urgency clause. On the issue on inoperability, look, here's the bottom line. When you have a ballot measure and a more effective suite of bills, 14 by the Assembly and the Senate, that are put into law and potentially conflicting with each other. That's why we need to be able to be crystal clear about the inoperable status.
Where do they conflict?
There are, happy to go through those with you. There are going to be some very specific conflicts that the speaker, myself, our staffs have been going through, and happy to go offline. It will take a little bit of time to be able to go through each and every bill.
I mean, that's the joke, right? I mean, they couldn't answer it because there is no conflict. Yeah. And we actually saw them back away.
They did, like 2 days later or a day later.
And say, yeah, there's really no conflict, and like tried to say, oh, there's a ideological conflict or something like that. They got called out that this was obviously a political move, dirty tricks. Yeah. God bless Ashley Zavala, because she just calls it like it is and goes right to the heart of that. And you saw they could not answer it. The other thing that was just crazy was, the urgency.
Yeah, the urgency.
For the pro tem to say, well, this is about the urgency and the voters expect us to do this now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've been talking about this for at least 5 years.
We introduced bills, like 5-10 years ago.
And you've killed every reform measure that has been proposed, even by Democrats, Democratic legislators that propose things, and they would kill everyone. Where was the urgency then? They had no urgency, but now all of a sudden they want to do things urgently. Well, it's clear that it's only for political gain that they're trying to do that. Yeah. And I actually, when I got asked about this right after that press conference, I said, sure, pro tem, let's make it urgent. Yeah. Let's make it urgent and pass them. Just take out this inoperability clause.
Yeah. Our issue isn't with the urgency.
Right. I mean, we're happy to do urgent anytime.
But we don't want the political games. Right.
But just do both, right? And let the voters decide this, this Prop 47 reform issue, and then let's do what we can do in the legislature to tackle retail theft. And that's exactly it. You can do both.
So I think you're seeing and just to update from last week, because last week we kind of just laid out what was going on, but I think you're seeing since last week, these bills went through the Public Safety Committee in the Assembly. They did not get amended. So the expectation was that maybe they'll get amended with this inoperability language in public safety. They did not. Why? Because the chair of that committee said, no, I don't want anything to do with this.
And because of an active opposition party.
Yes, right? And because of an active opposition party. And, you're seeing bipartisan kind of, I think, coalition building behind opposing these amendments. Senator Marie Alvarado-Gil from the North State, Democrat from the North State, came out and tweeted last week, I oppose the amendments to these two bills, and I was not consulted about them prior. Let me be clear, I do support the Prop 47 reform initiative and believe voters have the right to vote on this. This is not about policy, it's about politics, to your point. Right. So you're seeing this fracturing, I think, of I think the Democratic caucus on this, and which rightfully so. I mean, this is a very transparent political ploy, and it's not in the best interest of the voters. It's not in the best interest of California. It's pure politics, and I think people are fed up with it. So.
Totally, man. I mean, and this goes back to right where we started, which is, us being an organized and active opposition party, calling this out, putting the spotlight on this kind of stuff, involving the public and letting the public know this is going on, and being able to get that message out, I think has led, to the pressure, the public pressure that is now coming on this. And it's causing Democrats to go, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. And so my hope is that our colleagues, the legislature will back away from this. This was, I believe, being pushed by the governor. Yeah. They looked really bad in that press conference last week. And I think there's a lot of Democrats in the caucus that are saying, let's not do this. And so my hope is, they didn't do it last week when these bills were in committee. My hope is that it doesn't happen in appropriations this week, which is kind of the next stop.
Yep. Yeah.
And hopefully we're able to stop this. And now, that's what an active and strong opposition party can do. Absolutely. When we all work together, and that's what you and I and our caucus have been doing, and I think it's great.
100%. And we've been getting the word out to our constituents on this. It is in Appropriations Committee today, so we'll see what happens there. But we successfully stopped them from being amended in public safety. Let's keep it going, right? Let's keep raising doubts on this so that I honestly don't even know if they have the votes, to be honest with you. And so let's keep the pressure up. And I think that's what I've been. I was at a town hall last week in my district on fentanyl, and we were talking about this. The initiative's the only thing left this year probably that does anything meaningful about fentanyl and about actually getting after the people that are dealing it in our communities and getting it in the hands of our kids.
Right.
The legislature is not doing anything about that. They should be, but they're not. Right. And this is our only opportunity to do something about that this year. I had fentanyl bills. Our caucus had a bunch of fentanyl bills. They're all dead. Right. They killed them all. And so, if we're really serious about this, we gotta let voters have a voice on this. So
exactly. I thought you did a great job of pointing that out last week in the press conference.
Oh yeah.
And just exactly, representing your constituents and saying, where is this?
Yeah.
And this retail theft package, sure, let's move those forward.
Yeah.
But we don't need to play games.
Yep. Exactly. 100%. So this morning, Wall Street Journal editorial board, I think this shows kind of to the level that it's rising. They put out an editorial on this. A voter revolt grows in California on retail theft, basically. And, they call them out. The goal for them, the majority party, is to appear as if they are doing something about crime without enacting substantive reforms. He just said that the organized retail theft bills are superior to the initiative. We know that's not true, right?
Right.
And so Wall Street Journal calling him out on that. And they basically said, instead of trying to dupe and disenfranchise voters, how about you listen to them?
Right.
And
I love that.
I think that's perfect. That's how they ended it, right? It's
right.
like the perfect point to end on. It's like, what are you afraid of? Why are you so afraid of the voters voting on this? Because they might have a different opinion than the lawmakers.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty frustrating. So,
and that's democracy.
That's democracy.
Right? Democracy. Hey, let the voters decide this issue. And for the governor, especially, who always talks about democracy, he doesn't really practice it. He's trying to get taxpayer protection off the ballot.
Yep.
Right. He's gone to the Supreme Court asking them to pull it. And now he's doing, he's behind these efforts to try and mess with the Prop 47 reform. If you really care about democracy, then let the voters vote on these issues and let them decide what's the proper path forward.
Tired of being lectured on democracy in this state capitol, right? When you see what is going on in California, to your point, to take things off the ballot, to undermine things on the ballot, because to disenfranchise voters, I mean, it's so hypocritical, and it definitely needs to be called out. So
absolutely,
great point. All right, any final thoughts before we let you go? I think we covered a lot.
Great discussion, and hey, man, it's just been good to be on here. My first time being on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And man, I think we're doing a great job in the legislature and working on issues that people care about.
Yeah,
and we're going to continue to do it, and we're not going to stop. So,
for sure,
more to come.
All right, sounds good. Quick announcement: next week we're actually going to have our first Democrat legislator on the podcast.
Okay.
So we had Carlos Villapudua teed up a few weeks ago, and some things happened. He wasn't able to make it. Next week we're actually going to have Josh Lowenthal on here to talk about social media and the effect it has on our kids, and really kind of dive into some of those issues, which I know something obviously you care about as well. So it should be an interesting discussion. So we'll see how that goes.
All right.
If you want to share ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. You can listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, watch, subscribe, or follow on YouTube, X, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Point of Order Pod. And you can follow today's hosts on Twitter, myself at Joshua_Hoover, and then James, I believe, is at J_Gallagher83. Right. I believe that is AD, the letters A and D 3. Check out James. Actually, you're a great follow on X. So, check out his X page.
Yeah.
And you're very
It's been one of my favorite modes.
You're very active. So, love following you on there. But James, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
See you later.